to co-present. Welcome to everybody who's coming in now. My name is Anna Kassinger. I am a curriculum developer here at the museum. And with me, I'm delighted to be joined by Jackie Jecka. She is one of our fabulous teachers and specializes in teaching online. And I'm also quite honored to be joined by Cordy Galligan, who... Cordy, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Cordy Galligan, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Business Development with AAUW, a collaborator of the museum.
Wonderful, thank you. Before we get started, I'm just going to lay out what we're going to do today. First, we're going to talk about why we're here. I'm going to give you an overview of our digital classroom women's suffrage module and the resources. And then we're going to hear, as we go along, from Cordy Galligan about some of the wonderful gems that are hidden within the module. And Jackie is going to tell teachers and students, but teachers especially, how they can use these resources in the classroom. To start things off, Cordy, could you just explain to our audience why it is we ended up working together?
Certainly. AAUW is a leading and respected voice on women's issues. In addition to being one of the largest NGO funders of postgraduate women's education in the world, we've collaborated in many areas with the museum, including its every 4-year exhibit on voting. So this module seems to be a natural outcropping of both our interests in the right to vote. And we know women have been written out of history. Often the suffrage movement is a few minutes in a classroom, as Anna has often said, but it's an important era in U.S. history. And at times when classrooms face tremendous budgetary restrictions, it's fabulous to know that this rich module is available to classrooms at no cost. So that's our involvement.
Thank you. And we have been so honored to have AAUW support for quite some time now to help us, as Cordy said, tell this story in a more rich and nuanced way than is often done. So we hope that by the end of this webinar, you, our viewers, will walk away with 3 things. First, that you'll walk away with a deeper understanding of the women's suffrage movement itself, particularly some of the broader goals. Second, we'll help you walk away with an understanding of what our module has to offer, the resources available in it, and then third, ways that you can immediately apply what you've seen and gathered in the classroom. So to get started, I am going to share my screen so I can show you what the digital classroom looks like. So let's see if I can get this to work. Share. All right, can everybody see my screen? Jackie, Cordy?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. So what I'm showing you right now is the home page of our digital classroom. You can see our URL at the top. And I'm not going to walk you through at the moment how to register, but I would like teachers to note that we don't collect any personally identifying information from students, just a first name and last initial, so that it's very easy for students to access this module in the classroom but also at home. So once you've signed in, you're going to click on Preview New Module, and this will take you to the home page of the Women, Their Rights and Nothing Less module, and you'll see at the top 4 tabs: Historical Connections, Media Literacy, Civics and Citizenship, and Lesson Plans. And the first 3 represent our pedagogy here at the museum. These are what we call our prisms of learning. Historical connections we start with because we want students to understand where the origins of any ideas or movements in history came from. Then with media literacy, we want students to understand how they can interpret the artifacts that they're seeing, the tools and techniques as well of participants in the civil rights movement or the women's suffrage movement, that they use to create advocacy campaigns. And then we want students to be able to apply these lessons in their own lives to make a change and be informed, engaged citizens. And then the lesson plans at the end help teachers of all experience levels. So whether you're a veteran teacher and you're just looking for some new ideas for to plug into your existing curriculum, or you're a new teacher and you just need a plug and play because you're short on time, these are here for you. So the first interactive that I'm going to introduce you to is our Historical Connections module. And as Cordy said, so many of us growing up got the impression that the women's suffrage movement started with the Seneca Falls Convention, and then they advocated for a couple of decades, and it ended successfully with the ratification of the 19th Amendment. But what we want to bring out in the module is that there is so much more to the work that these women and sometimes men did, that it was a succession of trials, of failures, of some successes, learning from those, building on those. So we show students what it's like to be passionate about a cause and stick with it even if change doesn't come as quickly as we wish it did. So within this timeline, we have 85 entries. We have over 250 primary source documents and 9 videos with experts, including one with the archivist at AAUW, Suzanne Gould, for which we're quite grateful. And then within each entry, we have multiple sources, and I'm going to show you what this looks like now. So this is one of our examples. Event number 42 is the foundation of the ACA. Cordy, would you like to tell us about this?
I would, and actually this is our favorite portion of the timeline, so thank you for landing here first. But what you'll see with these 4 items is that they represent the founding of the ACA, the Association of Collegiate Alumna, which eventually, through various morphings, turned into AAUW, and it was founded in 1881. The photographs that you'll see on the module are of our founders, Marion Talbot, who was 24 years old at the time, and Ellen Swallow Richards. So this references back to what Anna was saying. We tend to think of the women's suffrage movement as being very much an older women's movement because those are the pictures we see: Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, but there were a number of young women involved. For example, there was Maude Wood Park, who traveled to college campuses to recruit young women to join the movement. Marion Talbot, again, only 24 years old, and one of the first 17 women graduates of America's colleges and universities that said, we need to band together. There's strength in numbers and a way to make things easier for those coming behind them. While these women were successful in getting their degrees, there were a number of women who matriculated, did the coursework, and yet when they left, the schools would not convey a degree upon them. Women fought for the right to receive an education, much like women fought for the right to vote. And the two movements share a very common history. As the first generation of women to break down the doors of higher education, the ACA leaders realized that in order to carry out their civic responsibility as newly educated women, they also needed the right to vote. And they too exercised their First Amendment rights to fight for access to higher education. So in addition to the photos, you'll also see our ACA Constitution and Articles of Incorporation.
Oh, Cordy, thank you. I'm going to share my screen so we go back. And it's so wonderful this, as I was researching and writing to learn about this, to understand the role of youth, that, as Cordy said, it wasn't just the older women, the photographs that we have today of Elizabeth Cady Stanton and others, and we hope that students will be inspired, even if their clothing was a little bit different, if their mannerisms or ways of speaking were strange or feel strange to us now, their goals were the same. And within this, as Courtney said, we have this wonderful, the Articles of Incorporation. Also for teachers on the right-hand side, you'll see that in addition to the large amount of context that we provide for each event, for most of these events we also have deeper questions. So for AP teachers, for example, who want to prepare their students for DBQs, many of these questions will help do just that. They're also wonderful ways to spark classroom discussions, to get some critical thinking about the events as well as to check for understanding. And speaking of tools that teachers can use, Jackie, can you start telling us about what we see here for teachers under lesson plans?
Sure. So within each module, specifically the Women and Their Rights and Nothing Less module, we do have some pre-made classroom-ready lesson plans, and you can find that on the header of every page, and you'll see it with lesson plans. If you click on that, it'll show you the long list of lesson plans we have. We have 3 for each of our learning prisms. So you can see that, and then you can also see that right away, they're linked to standards of learning, and these standards of learning include anything from C3 to Common Core, to the Center for Civic Education, and of course the International Society for Technology, or ISTE. So all of those are outlined in our learning module, and you can see those very clearly there. But I wanted to break down each of those prisms one by one. So we can see the standards of learning, and all of these lesson plans are going to align with that. The first one we have is for historical connections, and we have 3 lesson plans. The first is the women who made the movement, and this is really going to focus on the leaders of the movement and what they did and the tools they used in order to further their movement to success. The second one is things change and things stay the same. And throughout the history of the movement, there are different periods, and this is going to look at those periods to see how they differ and how they're the same comparatively to each other. And then finally, our third one is perspectives on women's suffrage. Not everybody agreed with women's suffrage, which is why the battle was so long, and this is going to look at those perspectives. But going beyond our pre-made lesson plans, we have a few extension activity ideas for you. So to begin with, to kind of go back to those anti-suffragettes, you can have a Socratic seminar, so a very detailed discussion in your classroom using a primary source. And we do have so many primary sources in our timeline. And one I really like is the Monstrance. I always say this incorrectly. So Remonstrance, which is number 48, and that's really going to bring out those ideas of those anti-suffragettes. So looking at their point of view, and I think this would really provoke a lot of really great discussion. The second thing that we recommend is researching the individual state history. Whatever state you're in, there's going to be a different history for women's suffrage. Some states had women's suffrage before the 19th Amendment, and some waited until the bitter end to really pass women's suffrage in the state. So look at that history, and a great resource is really AAUW's local chapters. They have a lot of great artifacts, and they shared with us here. So really reach out to them and find out what they have for you. And then to bring some technology into the discussion, have your students create a public service announcement or a PSA for suffragettes. Use YouTube, Animoto, Vimeo for video, and really have that interactive video for everyone to view. Or brainstorm a social media strategy. How could suffragists use social media? It would be really interesting to think about how they would use Twitter, especially with those First Amendment rights of free speech. And then you could also create a poster, so more of a visual element. And we really like the app Fotor, F-O-T-O-R, and that's going to bring in primary sources, secondary sources together into a collage, and you can create a public service announcement from there. So with that, we're really going to focus on visual elements in the next section. So I'm going to hand it back over to Anna to show you those.
Thank you, Jackie. And that leads us to another broad theme, which is the radical use of the First Amendment, especially by the press, or rather of the press. we think today that our students are so immersed in social media or bombarded constantly by images and live in a very visual culture. But the truth is that the women of the women's suffrage movement did as well, and they knew wisely how to create scenes that the press would be interested in, would capture, and then would sway public opinion. So I'm going to share my screen again. We'll go back to our PowerPoint. Share. Wonderful. One of the gems of this movement happened quite late, about 1917. It was after the American Women's Suffrage Association and the National Association for Women's Suffrage had recombined to form NASA, and they were taking a conservative approach with Carrie Chapman Catt at the helm. And Alice Paul was not so interested in being polite and dainty, being dainty and working around the issues. She wanted to press President Wilson to make change now. So she split off with the National Women's Party. And together they pioneered the use of assembly and petition. They had the first ever picket of the White House. They quoted him directly from international speeches, putting them on large posters to point out the hypocrisy of Wilson promoting democracy abroad, but not at home. And at first, the public didn't know what to make of this. They thought it was kind of amusing, but then the patriotic sentiments rose, and President Wilson lost patience with the suffragists, and they ended up being jailed. And that's who we see on the right, Alice Paul, probably at Occoquan Workhouse. And these images were so dramatic that the press noticed them, and especially once they were jailed, it turned public sentiment and helped propel the women's suffrage movement to achieve its primary goal of achieving the vote. So one tool that we've made to help students understand the power of the visual is our media suffrage map. And you can see that there are pins locating objects that were made throughout the movement by where they were made. And you'll see many of them will look familiar to students. This one we have on right now on the right could have been made for the pro-life, pro-choice debates that have happened recently here on the National Mall. And teachers, so you know you can view larger image. These will be extremely high-res, quite large, so you can print them out to make them into classroom posters at any size, hand them out to your students so they can work on analyzing tools of persuasion and persuasive techniques, whether it's for or against the movement, and see how culture and geography affected people's understanding and support of the movement at the time. And Jackie has some more on that.
So for our 3 lesson plans for media literacy, we really focus on perspective and persuasion. And the first lesson plan we have is called Debating Women's Suffrage. And it's what's the perspective and how does this perspective influence policy that's created. We also have one that's entitled Tools to Persuade. So it's looking at those persuasive techniques in order to maximize the impact of the message. And then our 3rd lesson plan is all about bringing persuasion and perspective together and creating a persuasion portfolio that brings together different artifacts and analyzes those artifacts about what their message is and what perspective they're taking it from. So some extension activities that we can talk about here include, again, looking at images. One of my favorite activities in the classroom was analyzing political cartoons. We have a few examples of historic political cartoons in the timeline itself, so you can find one at number 45 for Bella Lockwood, or number 61 for Washington State getting women the right to vote. So those are historic examples, and then compare those to some modern ones. I always really enjoyed using the Library of Congress's Analyzing Political Cartoons worksheet. That was always really, really helpful in my classroom. And then, of course, I have to plug one of our classes here at the museum. We do it virtually, and we do it on site. So if you can come to DC, we'd love to see you. And this is our Believe It or Not class, all about media literacy and what to look for and what questions to ask when you're examining sources on your own. So it's a really good tool for those digital natives. And then finally, we recommend another activity about creating a newscast. Maybe create a newscast or write an op-ed. And this is really going to challenge your students to think about perspective, think about point of view and persuasion. You can do those talking heads like they do on Fox News or MSNBC. Get their opinions and really try to encourage students to work with that, really focus on that point of view, or see if you can challenge them to write a newscast without any bias showing. It's a lot more difficult than it seems. And then, of course, just writing an op-ed is always a great activity to do using those tools of persuasion. So we love to persuade people to really kind of focus in on our point of view, and the next section lends itself really well to that. So Anna, back to you.
Thank you, Jackie. One of the things I think that you were touching on, but is worth saying explicitly, is that these sorts of activities prepare students to be active and engaged citizens. And this is a third theme of the women's suffrage movement that, at least when I was a student, we never covered, but that was the importance of civic engagement during the women's suffrage movement. This is a production, a pamphlet from NASA, which says, "Why Women Want to Vote. Women are citizens and wish to do their civic duty." So we were inspired by this, not just to teach students that women understood their participation in the suffrage movement to be about civic duty, but also to say this is important for us to teach, to take inspiration from, so that we can foster the next generation of inspired, engaged students. One way to do that is through a lot of the opportunities that AAUW has for both young women and young men. Cordy?
Thank you, Anna. That's an excellent segue into the relevance of the work AAUW is doing today. Again, to either use our website, www.aauw.org, or to contact your local AAUW branch, you'll find a number of tools and resources around current civic engagement, such as voting. I mean, I referenced earlier our every 4 years collaboration, but women fought, and as you'll see in the module, fought very hard for this right. So we need to look at who is exercising or not exercising their civic duty today. And I think an excellent study of that could be a drill down as to who votes, who doesn't, and why. There are a number of other issues that AAUW tries to inform the public on that I think would make outstanding classroom modern-day applications of civic engagement. And I would just recommend anyone to look at the website to see what's currently the most viral issue and work with that.
Thank you. And Jackie, do you have anything to add about what teachers can do?
Teachers can also find 3 more lesson plans for civics and citizenship on the module, and they really focus on using our First Amendment freedoms, introducing the First Amendment as well. So We can also look towards the module for some opportunities to use Glogster, create a visual poster, and really discuss what's going on currently today. So focusing on the First Amendment, the history of the First Amendment, and how it's applied today. Really powerful tools and really great lesson plans to bring to your classroom. And with those tools, you can also create your own service learning project. We love service learning here at the museum. So we really want to encourage it. Get out into your community, research what's happening in your community, create an action plan, and then actually put it to action, put it to work. And another great program we want to recommend, of course, is AAUW's Program in a Box. And hopefully Cordy can tell you a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Jackie. Yes, we have put together a program in a box that basically takes this module and steps you through how to make it available. If you're not an instructor that's joining us today, but someone that is a history buff, it's an outstanding way of introducing this module to your local high schools and college campuses. So again, you can go to our website and under the search button, just search for Program in a Box. And the very first one is Women, Their Rights, and Nothing Less. And again, it steps you very easily through how to make this the widespread tool that it should be for our underfunded and very deserving classrooms.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. This concludes the information we have to share right now about the module, about the women's suffrage movement, and about how to use it in the classroom. But we'd love to encourage all of the viewers out there to contact us either at the museum with educationprograms@museum.org or at AAUW for more information on how to get involved with AAUW programs, how to use the digital classroom, and museum resources more broadly. So with that, I want to thank you again for watching, for listening in, for playing along, and we hope to connect with you soon.
Bye.
Bye.